New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
New Thought Media Network is excited to present Divine Science Everywhere, Fridays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Eastern. Come explore a modern experience of divine science with Reverend Joy Fletcher, Reverend Jeff Radcliffe, and Bishop Durrell Watkins. Join us as we open our eyes to divine science everywhere we look. Fridays on New Thought Media Network.
Welcome to our 11th broadcast of Divine Science Everywhere. Divine Science Everywhere features divine science ministers and New Thought guests discussing the principles and practice of divine science. I'm Reverend Joy Fletcher, and currently I'm serving as the president of the Divine Science Ministers Association. And also I express my ministry in many ways, and one of them is a grief support specialist and a death doula. We welcome you here today. I'd also like to introduce who is with me, Reverend Jeff Radcliffe of Giatti Ministries and various New Thought organizations, including the Divine Science Federation and Divine Science Ministers Association. He also co-hosts fireside chats on Fridays on this network, New Thought Media Network. Also with us is Bishop Durrell Watkins, the senior minister of the Sunshine Cathedral in Fort Lauderdale, the president of the Divine Science Federation, and an auxiliary bishop with the Global Justice Institute. So with that, we'd like to begin our hour with a centering moment. So will you please join with me as we center ourselves in the living truth of divine science, the eternal reality that omnipresence is the ground of all being, even in the moments of unrest, division, or uncertainty. So let us begin by affirming this together. Divine love is present in every moment, in every place, in all things. Divine love is present in every moment, in every place, and in all things. And again, divine love is present in every moment, in every place, and in all things. So even when appearances suggest fear, separation, or chaos, we can return to the changeless center, the presence of infinite love that knows no opposite. Melinda E. Kramer, co-founder of Divine Science, wrote, "The infinity and omnipresence of being, its action and result, comprising the one self-existing all, includes the unity and equality of man with itself. I and the Father are one." Now, friends, there is no place where sacred wholeness is not. There are no people outside our circle of divine love. There is no event, no moment, no experience that is not ultimately enfolded in the infinite. So as we breathe into this truth, remember that we are not denying pain or difficulty, but instead declaring our spiritual nature and knowing that divine order exists beneath all appearances. And there is a deeper reality that holds us, unites us, and uplifts us. This is true for ourselves as well as one another. We gather in our hearts and our minds in the awareness of spiritual community, a community that's based on a sacred connection. We don't necessarily have to agree, but we do have a commonality that we are all part of divine love. Our connection is not limited by distance, time, race, belief, or form. We are united in God, in spirit, and in truth. Emmett Fox, a divine science minister, reminds us there is no difficulty that enough love will not conquer, no disease that enough love will not heal, no door that enough love will not open, no gulf that enough love will not bridge. Enough love? What is enough? Not a quantity, but a quality of awareness. Enough divine love to shift our perception. Enough to see divine good where fear once stood. Enough to act with courage and kindness when reaction might be easier. We are here to love beyond the appearance, to see spirit where the world sees only division, to hold fast to omnipresence where everything external may cry out otherwise. So let's stay focused on this center where love is not an emotion, but the very essence of who and what we are. God is all, both invisible and visible. One presence, one mind, one power is all. This one that is all, perfect life, perfect love, and perfect substance. God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. There is nothing outside this. So as we begin to or prepare to welcome our guests, Reverend Dr. Christine Emmerling and Reverend Cherie Garrett, we acknowledge their presence as lights within this greater spiritual tapestry. Each of them, in their own unique way, has held sacred space for community, healing, growth, and remembrance of the One. From brick and mortar buildings to digital ministries, from teaching to spiritual care, their lives reflect what it means to stand in truth and to serve in love. And so, beloved community, let us go forward in this hour remembering the divine is fully present. Love is the power. Unity is the truth. We are one. We are never alone. Let this moment be a blessing, a remembering, and a renewal. And so it is.
Yeah, so it is.
So it is.
So thank you for sharing this centering time with me. We have more good information, and we'll be chatting with our multi-generational legacy divine scientists. But first, let's take a quick break to hear from the network. This is Divine Science Everywhere on New Thought Media Network.
Well, welcome back. I'm so excited to talk today with Reverend Dr. Christine Emmerling and Reverend Cherie as well. Mother and daughter. How cool is that? But first, I was thinking earlier today about, there's a lot of news coming out lately from the Supreme Court, different opinions about different issues, and a lot of people expressing worry and fear about these things. And so I went looking to see what I could find about that particular subject. And I turned to Divine Science and Healing by our co-founder, Melinda Kramer. She's got a section of the book called Questions by Beginners. And so I went there because I'm thinking to myself, you know what better place to explain how we handle such issues than to find it from the very beginning. And I found a question the person had asked basically about praying and had been taught that we pray for our spiritual prosperity and not for our material prosperity. And so that's where the question came in. But her answer, while it addressed that, it speaks to so much more. And that's what I wanted to focus on, was her answer, where she said, as long as we hold that there is both material and spiritual prosperity, we will hold one in truth and the other in error, which is a dual theory not found in unity. The moment we hold truth for both, they are seen as one, even as truth is a unit. And she goes on to say, the belief of inequity and want has come about through misunderstanding of God's law and through the belief that we are not to use the truth in our everyday walks of life. Let us no longer hold our business in separation from God. Unity within is expressed in outward cooperation. So how does that translate to being worried and afraid of what's going on in the world? Well, a lot of people like to compartmentalize their lives. This is our mundane life, house, bills, children, family, things of that nature. And this is my spiritual life, my meditation, my prayer, my spiritual practice, whatever. We like to compartmentalize things because it kind of makes things easier to deal with and understand. The problem with that approach, like Melinda said, you can't compartmentalize God. It's all one thing. As divine scientists, we teach the omnipresence of God, that God is everywhere, equally and evenly present. And so if God is everywhere, then there's nothing that is not an expression of divinity. So we take that and we look at things and we realize that if we're looking at our issues in our lives through eyes of worry and fear, we're separating ourselves from God. Well, you can't really do that because God is everywhere, as Melinda pointed out. So what do? We pray. We pray. Even St. Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, said, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, with a thankful heart, offer up your prayers and your requests to God, and God will bless you with peace that nobody can completely understand. And the peace of God that exceeds all understanding will keep your hearts and your minds. And a few years ago, a country singer by the name of Luke Bryan recorded a song called Pray About Everything, which is actually this topic put to music. And in the song, he goes to his mom and says, "Mama, what am I going to do?" And she says, "Child, there's only one thing you can do. Don't worry about nothing. Pray about everything." A friend of mine posted on Facebook that she thought she was getting on God's nerves because she prays about everything. Well, actually, she's doing it right. God's phone number is not 911, folks. God is there, ready and willing to hear. If we were to personify God, we know that God is spirit and actually not male, female, whatever. But if we were to put God as a person, we would realize that God cares about every aspect of our lives. So we pray. We don't ask for anything. We pray for the omnipresence of spirit, which contains all good, to come back to our memory, to help us to remember that we are one with spirit, that there is nothing going on that we can't handle, that it's all good, because in the final analysis, it's all God and things will work themselves out. We open ourselves up to the omniscience, which is the divine knowingness, the divine wisdom of spirit, and we trust that God will lead us to what we need to do to bring about that which is going to be for our highest and best. So when you look at the news, and I recommend you don't look at it all that often. Just know what's going on, but don't let yourself be so caught up in it that you become worried, racked with fear. But if you do, just remember you can sit and wait on the omnipresence of God and the omniscience to show you what you can do to alleviate those fears. That's what we do in divine science. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, now before we meet our guest, let's take another quick commercial break here at Divine Science Everywhere on the New Thought Media Network.
New Thought Media Network is excited to present Divine Science Everywhere, Fridays at 2 p.m. Mountain Time and 4 p.m. Eastern. Come explore a modern experience of divine science. With Reverend Joy Fletcher, Reverend Jeff Radcliffe, and Bishop Durrell Watkins. Join us as we open our eyes to divine science everywhere we look. Fridays on New Thought Media Network.
Well, we're back, and I'm so excited. I have so many questions. I think this is the first time that we've had two guests at the same time talking about maybe the same stuff, maybe it's very different stuff. We'll see. But this is new. We've got a little extra time built in for it, and I'm so happy that we're all doing this. First of all, this is a legacy family. Reverend Christine, your mother was a minister, wasn't she?
Yes.
And so we have 3 generations so far of divine science ministry in your family. I don't really know much about your mother. Can you tell us what she was about in her ministry and how that led into yours?
Well, I had a whole outline. If you know, yes, my mother, Reverend Joan Killip, and she was ordained in 1985, and I walked her down the aisle to be ordained, because I was also taking my coursework, and so I was ordained in 1987, and she walked me down the aisle.
Oh, nice.
That are, as I've written here, she had a lot of influence in my spirituality, and that's really what I wanted to present today, is how she influenced my spirituality, not just divine science.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to mention my mother passed in 1997. So,
well, if you have things that you we're ready, like prepared to say, just go out. When you run out of steam, I'll ask you another question, but we want to know
Let's
everything
do
you
it.
want to say. We want everything you want to say.
Okay. Well, I want to share that my grandmother, her mother, read Daily Word.
Oh.
Okay.
And my mother told me that story. And I always thought, wow, well, that's why my grandmother always seemed to be more happy and positive.
Mm-hmm.
And
So your family's been involved in New Thought since almost the beginning, at least second generation, of New Thought.
another generation, yeah.
So
My grandmother.
Generation.
I think, let's see, 88, and then 89, I think were Divine Science and Unity, the beginnings. And so within the second generation, I guess, of New Thought as organized, your family was already there. Yes. The early 20th century, your grandmother would have been reading Daily Word, right?
Yes, she was.
Excellent. Wow. That's a lineage.
We always had Daily Word in our house.
I love it still.
And
you participated in your mother's ordination and in your daughter's.
yeah,
Conducted your. So that's.
I helped to conduct my
special thing
daughters.
too.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was quite something. And as a young woman, my mother was interested in astrology, numerology, Eastern, and New Thought teachings. And she actually did astrological charts for each of her children. And she had 4 children and that she gave birth to. She also adopted 2 others later on. Nice. When she remarried. I would say my mother's influence began when I was in her womb. She had a visioning board.
Okay.
And I got to see this after she had passed away. And it was among her belongings, so I got to see it. And on it, for me, one of the things was a picture of a little baby, looked like the Gerber baby, and it said, "A spiritual child."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think she got what she asked for.
Yeah.
And so, so anyway, my mother divorced when I was about 2 years old. And he passed away a few years later. And my second father passed away when I was 9. And my mother shared that she had a vision when of her second husband. He came to her during the night. And she saw, and he actually sat down next to her and spoke with her.
Wow.
And of course, she shared this with me. And it did help comfort her. And he told her how he was living another life there.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of like a Swedenborg experience, a vision of the other world and meeting people. That's sort of like Emanuel Swedenborg. That's amazing.
I've done some of that in my life too.
Yeah. Is that comfortable? Is that inspiring? Is that exciting? Or is it a little, what's this about?
Well, first of all,
I mean, for you, not, other people.
Well, mine has mostly been in dream states,
where
you suddenly find yourself. Partly, I was helping people cross over, and part of that is you're experiencing their death with them.
Mm.
So that can be challenging. And
sort of a posthumous death doula.
See, before I went to sleep, this is later on when I was living at Lake Tahoe, I would ask to be a service as part of my nighttime prayers.
Hmm.
And so I worked all night long. And they had me doing all kinds of things.
Nice.
And I also had visions, experiences, I should say, experiences, when my son passed, that we would meet. It's like we would meet each other. Uh, and I always got to hug him, which
Oh,
was wonderful because that's the one thing I missed most.
of course. Oh, that's
And
lovely.
he was 9 when he passed.
Mm,
So that changed our life a lot.
sure.
That was, yes. And
Were you
so,
already in ministry, or was that before?
hmm?
Were you already in ministry, or was that before?
Oh, before.
Okay. So that had an impact on your ministry later, no doubt.
It did. And it's interesting because mostly my mother's experience of spirituality was studying, reading,
Hmm.
and then of course she became a teacher and minister. Mine was more experiential, and I like to prove things.
Right. Demonstrate. Well, you've had, and I was hoping you, and we do have actually plenty of time, so I hope you, if of course if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to do anything. But I know you've had a personal healing experience.
I've
And you probably had many, but there was one in particular you've talked about at conferences and whatnot. I was wondering if you could share that.
Well, the first one I had. First of all, I wanted to share. First of all, before we get into that, my mother's last husband was a spiritualist minister.
Oh,
And so he left that and went into New Thought with my mother. but he brought in, doing more psychic stuff and into our life and hands-on healing and such. So that opened up into, I think, my experience, into my spirituality there. And so when I was 14, we lived across the street from this park, and so in the evening, in the summertime, I went and lay down and would stare at the stars. And I enjoyed doing this. And one night when I was doing this, I suddenly found myself one with the whole stars and everything. And it was this awesome type experience. And as soon as I kind of had the experience of, wow, it was over. It's like, you can't have a thought.
yeah,
It ends it.
right. It was sort of a Melinda moment where you just knew, you just saw, you just experienced the truth completely. That's from a Melinda.
Yes.
I love that.
And also, after my second father died, I had an experience of him.
Mhm.
And so I knew of life after death. It was never a question.
That's something people really wrestle with. So that's a great gift to have confidence in that.
Yeah, that way you don't have the fear over dying.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so when I was 15, I had an instantaneous healing experience. And I was, of course, I went to the drive-in movies with my sister and her friend. And while I snuck in, I was hiding in the trunk. And I got out of the trunk and I went to get into the back seat. And when I did, the car door slammed on my thumb. And I pulled it out, I yanked it out really quick. And of course, there was blood everywhere. And I went to the refreshment counter and they bandaged it and said I needed to go to the ER, get stitches. Well, we stayed for the movie. It was breakfast at Tiffany's. Couldn't miss that.
Of course not.
And so then when we went home, I showed it to my thumb to my parents, and they could see the white of the bone and said, "You need stitches." And so they sent me with my sister and friend to the ER. They stayed home. And so when I got to the ER, they soaked my thumb. My mother called to give permission for me to have stitches. And they said, "Is this a practical joke? We can't even figure out where the blood came from."
Mm.
And so later, when I went home, I found out they had that evening just come home from practitioner training in religious science. And they decided to put it to the test. And they did prayer treatment. And so that was my first experience of New Thought. Also, during that time, I was kind of a rebellious teenager at that time. And so I would get grounded, and my punishment was to attend church, which was religious science at that time. But I did get some exposure. And, we would have chats, about spiritual things.
Yeah.
And of course, when my mother remarried, I was 12, and I was the youngest child.
Mhm.
And within a year, I was the eldest child because all the others moved out. So I wasn't happy. That's why I was an unhappy camper
No.
dealing with that. And I ended up getting married when I was 17 in 1963. And I had 2 children. As you know, my one is here with us. And they were 18 months apart. And my marriage began to crumble at that time. And then I started seeking, and I opened up to the psychic world. Well, I don't recommend that to anyone, to go through. It's like going through the back door. And so that's when I got introduced to more spiritual things. And my mother gave me my first books. And this is the real, influence really begins here as well. And the first book she gave me was Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And while my children were napping, I would read, and I would do the exercises. And it introduced me to meditation. And then the second book she gave me was Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. And this one I had a real visionary experience while I was reading and meditating upon it. Yeah. And then she gave me The Infinite Way by Joe Goldsmith. And I learned
a lot of people's story.
And I learned
all the bases, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yes.
This one I really learned about silent meditation and, meditating on knowing God. It wasn't about things.
Right.
And I learned about affirmations.
What do you think about that? There's a big movement now in New Thought to sort of poo-poo affirmations that they don't really work and blah blah. Like like the newer wave, smarter, we know better, and sort of New Thought. What do you say about that? Like, if you've had positive experiences with affirmations, what do you say to people who say, "Oh no, that's not a good thing"? But when I was coming up, they said the same thing about denials, but now they're even saying it about affirmations. So
I totally disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to learn how to train our thinking. That's the easiest way to shift our mind. It's one of the easiest ways. Deep breathing is number one.
Mm-hmm. And do you still work with creative denials also?
Yes.
Nice.
And so in 1967, at 21 years of age, I got divorced. I had my faith and I had courage. I had no work experience.
And 2 kids.
And I had 2 kids. Yes. And I really believed in practicing what I was learning and doing. So it's more living. And this point, I knew life was a spiritual journey. It wasn't about the so-called American dream. I lived that, and it became a nightmare. And so, and I knew I wanted to be a practitioner and teacher. But first, I had to support my family. So, during this period of time, my mother attended the Infinite Way study group. And, listening to the Joe Goldsmith tapes, reel to reel back then. And this in this, 1960s. And she would make tapes for me. So I read one of his books, The Infinite Way, but then everything else was my listening to tapes in a meditative state,
Right. Nice.
allowing it to more or less seep in. I knew at this time that my soul, I personally didn't know what to do with the information, but I knew my soul would know what to do with it. Because a lot of it, I didn't even understand the lingo.
Right.
Because I had no real teacher. I mean, that was my teacher. And then that summer of 1967, my mother arranged for us to attend an Infinite Way retreat that was being held in Monterey, California by Virginia Stevens. She was a practitioner of the Infinite Way. And my one sister went along with this, and of course the tape study group people went. And what I remembered most from that stuck with me and my sister was, you can make molehills into mountains, or you can make mountains into molehills. And every time I was faced with something big, I would say this.
Yeah.
And my sister and I would say it to each other, when she would be making something big out of something,
Right.
that we would catch each other on this stuff.
Yeah. You can choose a new thought. You can do this differently. Well, we need to put a pin in it just there, because I need to ask Reverend Cherie some things, and then these other 2 people, they want to ask you stuff, and they're going to get mad at me for hogging up all your time. So I've got to switch gears just a little bit and then get out of their way so you can tell them some more of this story. I do need to say, we just sort of assumed that, because this is Christine Emmerling, and this is her 4 or 5 generations, as it turns out, New Thought, and she had this amazing church, and still is, but it had a transformation because of COVID, and a lot of churches didn't make it, but hers is still around because she adapted to, she chose a New Thought. So I just want you to know, in case you haven't heard their stories before, met them at conferences or whatever, that Reverend Christine is the senior minister of the Community of Infinite Spirit, located in Hollister, California. She, before her ministry career, she was a manager of computer services. She began her divine science education in 1980, and then was ordained in 87 and again in 90. In 1990, she also has an honorary doctorate degree on top of all the rest. She's a teacher, she's a practitioner, she's a minister, she's a leader, she's a mother, she's a grandmother. She is someone who's had a healing experience and has facilitated healing for other people. In 1986, she was certified as a hospice volunteer. She served on the faculty of the Brooks Divinity School, and in 2011 became the director of the West Coast campus for the United Divine Science Ministerial School, which was how I came through Divine Science, was from United. In 2015 is when she was given her doctorate degree, and she has served on both DSFI and DMSA boards for about 13 years each, and the Brooks Divinity School. Now, Reverend Cherie has raised 2 children, most of the time as a single mom. She has 2 grandsons, one from her son and one from her daughter. She also has a bonus daughter and a bonus granddaughter and grandson. Her career was a senior accountant and an operations manager. Cherie has been a member of the Divine Science Church of Truth in San Jose, California since 1981, and is now known as the Community of Infinite Spirit, located in Hollister. Reverend Cherie worked as an administrator part-time for the church off and on for 20 years, and that's what she's doing right now. She has been on the board as much as, there's term limits and whatnot, but she's been on there as much as the bylaws allowed, and she's on there now. She has taught Sunday school and supported the ministry in congregation groups and the grounds, the properties of the church, any capacity needed. She started taking divine science classes in 1990 and was ordained in 2020. I witnessed it my very own self. It was at a conference online, and her mother did it. It was very beautiful. And that was through the United Divine Science Ministry School also. She assists with Sunday service, weekly meditation, divine science classes, Zoom book studies, whatever she can, which is quite a lot, even though she has the experience of a disability. And she continues to grow and unfold and perform ministry along the way. So, Reverend Cherie, that's a lot. That's a long journey. Why don't you tell us something about growing up in this family, this unity, divine science, astrology, religious science, manifesting family? What was that like? Did just becoming minister seem like, well, yeah, that's what we do? Or was it a later revelation that, I should be doing this too?
Well, one, I want to thank you for such a privilege to be here and talking about our family. And, at first you just think your family is a normal family and this is the way it is. And until you start going to school and you start realizing it is way out there, and, we had a lot of experiences. My mom really influenced us in spirituality, and my brother and I, and started teaching us about our energy and our mind. And we would play games, to try influencing that. And, we were really a part of Mother Nature living up in Tahoe. And so we learned to respect the animals and to look at energy in trees and, to see our energy between our hands, put your hands together and really, play with that kind of energy. That was part of some of the games that we would learn. And I didn't know what this was really leading up to in life. You don't get it until you're, decades are going by and you're living life and getting married and having kids. You start realizing this. And, we started learning respect for food. You say your blessing, your prayers, bless this food as it blesses me. Thank you, God. Thank you for all the people who prepared the food, who grow the food. You extend it out there into the world. Still do that today. I don't even know how to have a plate or put something in front of me and not just put my hands over it and, and bless this. We even had a pyramid in the dining room, 8-foot pyramid in the dining room, and we would learn to put our food in there because it would keep the avocados ripe and, the bread would stay longer and you'd be able to sit in it and feel the energy going through there. Well, then you bring your friends home and, and I have a pyramid. And what is incense? And mom's playing meditation music. We learned about music on how your thoughts. They create what's going on around you, and they can influence yourself, and they can influence others. Music can influence yourself in a positive way. Or when I was a teenager, it's like, do you really want to listen to that? In the states that it can put you in. And as as I was raising kids and grandkids, I'm very aware of this, and bringing this out to them too. And so you really got this connection that their life was more. I mean, we didn't go to church very much because there weren't churches that she really believed in or wanted us to be around religion as much as it was being around spiritual and what are our gifts. And so it was a very big opening of, God is out there. God is everywhere present. we had a big responsibility growing up, because that responsibility of creating your life, what you do is what you create is yours. So you don't get to go blame everybody for things going on in your life. And so as a child, I've done some things that weren't the right thing to do, and instead of this scolding, there'd be an understanding of your energy influences yourself and others. There's karma. Do you want to create karma and the tenfold of it coming back into your life? And so that really taught me. So when kids were doing things, I'd be like, I don't want to go there. I don't want that coming back onto me. I started realizing in life that, as we were working with the spirituality and the psyche, that there was something different in me. And, with that, I was very emotionally around other people. I could, I really felt for other people. So if there were fights at school or kids that were being bullied, I was right there feeling it and wanting to do something about it. And I didn't see very much of that, going on. People would kind of go along with what was happening.
You do that online. You do that on social media still. That when there's mean stuff or crazy stuff, you're very present with just like this loving, sometimes just giving a heart to a nice message or whatever. But you're just there, not shunning it or ignoring it, but just sharing some love or some hope. Like I've noticed that you do that a lot on social media.
Yeah, and what you realize is that. And when you're talking about, you're creating yourself, right? As you're going through and the decades are going in spirituality, you start realizing this unfoldment that's taking place. And so my grandmother was a big influence, as being a part of the church. Now I'm in my 20s and I'm becoming part of the church. And how was that? That was a lot of business. And anybody who's run a church knows there's a lot of behind the scenes. And so as that was coming forth, there was this, can you help it with administration? Can you help with Sunday service? Can you, and so this assistance started coming in where, I was being asked and I would say yes, and didn't know that, 4 decades later that, that what a gift that was.
Mm-hmm.
You learn a lot in the spiritual, but as you're still raising kids, still working full time, still learning about relationships. There's so much that goes on in this world. Sometimes you kind of take a step back from what's taking place because you're so busy that you're not just focused on spiritual. You're not just sitting there, studying all the time. But that was always something in the background that was going on and trying to fit in. So, I would take fundamentals probably 3 times, 4 times. Started, got to go, started again, So it took a while to get through the classes and life would.
You got it. You really got it after all those times, though. I mean, I've known people doing that who just they would take it and then they would audit it another time or two just because they loved it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you really got it.
So you really go through that, and as I was going through, I started getting experiences. That's one thing about divine science. Practicing the principles, you start to really see the world in a different way, and the world starts to work with you differently. Mm-hmm. And so with this, I started getting experiences. And, one of the ones I had a healing with one of my children as they were a young child and sitting in my lap, family dog comes up and bites him in the eye and in the face. And, I rushed to the emergency room and, they're talking about, might lose the eye and all this drama and blood and such. And I reach out for my mom. My mom's at Brooks Divinity School. And such a great place to be at the time. You'd think you'd want her right next to you, but nope, she was right where she needed to be. Mm-hmm. And was able to ask, for prayer and bring people into prayer. And at the end, within weeks, she was healed and all was well, no scars. Wow. And I just had this presence within me to be able to know that, I believe in healing.
Yeah.
You just know, right?
Yeah.
And as you're going through with emotions, you start really learning when you're practicing divine science that what becomes your being is that you become love. There's a lot of things that happen to you when you go through divorces, when you have hardships of other people, when you have bosses that are really mean. We can go on and on of how things can happen to us. Even though we take responsibility for this creation, that we create in our lives for a reason, we're looking for the lesson, it still hurts. There's loss. And so as we're going through this, you can stay angry, but that's not the place to be. And after a while, you start realizing that you'd rather come from peace. And that's what's within your body. When you calm down from all that, God is there. That presence of love, peace, joy, happiness is there. And I have experienced a lot of anxiety. After my brother passed, it was very challenging. Other things that have gone on in my life, I won't get into, but really, my body had a very hard time with it. And I couldn't understand that. And I started learning that I'm actually empathic. So when you're an empath, you are experiencing other people and the whole world. So, and so as I'm moving through this, your body goes through, what is it, fight, flight, freeze, mode. Those are words that are out there now that people are using. Thank goodness there's more words for what people are experiencing. And so as you're going through this, there's nothing better than being in your own skin and knowing that you can turn to God in prayer, meditation, whatever tools that you can learn to use, and you can get back to that presence, which is so pure. And then you can express.
That's the golden key, isn't it? That's the golden key.
That's the golden key.
That's the golden key.
And I need this every day. Every breath I take, I need every day.
Excellent.
And with these experiences, and I'll do this real quickly because I know it's getting time. I now I get communications. Right? My dog that I had for 13 years, 130-pound Rottweiler German Shepherd, who was the church dog, who went and healed people all the time. Oh. And he was with me off leash, and we were just one. We went everywhere together. And it didn't matter where I was at. We read each other's minds. And it was time for him to be released. And as I was helping after he had passed, I was helping to get him out to where he needed to go into the parking lot of the church. We had a big parking lot. And I asked right before, my mom reminded me to ask for him to communicate with you through the veil. And so I did as he was passing. And when I had taken him out, I was very distraughted. I just lost my best friend. Sure. And I didn't quite remember that. And I went to open the door to go back into our fireside room where we lived. And I opened the door and I hear these words that say, stop, look, and observe. Mm-hmm. And I turn around and there was hundreds of birds that flew into the parking lot all around. And then the last one was a crow with something out of its mouth. And I heard the words, the circle of life. And since then, I've had experiences of crows, ravens that come to me. They'll squawk and squawk until I get the message. And I have found that message will lead me to people who have had strokes, who will be at their house. And for 2 days or 3 days that people don't know about it. And I have found 2 people that way and been able to get them to the hospital, and some of it passed. And so I know to very much listen. Yeah. And we've now taught my grandchildren that if somebody passes, that they can come back like as butterflies or, dragonflies. And for my grandson, he lost both his great-grandparents that he was very close to. And he was told they came back as butterflies. And I was just with them last week, and we were at a hotel, and there's all windows, and we're in the pool. And this white butterfly, which was the white butterfly that he knew, came flying up to the window and up to the window. And I said, oh, look, it's Mo. And he said, no, that's Papa. And
he knew the difference.
We're talking, he just turned 7 years old, but he knew this at 3 years old. Yeah. So we are passing this on to the next generations.
That's amazing.
If I can jump in real quick, that sparks a question for me, Reverend Sherry. As surely you're not going to be the last one in this family line to be a minister. It sounds like you're implanting seeds.
Well, that was what was implanted to me. And to answer Reverend Darrell's question, I did not, being a minister was like, you've got to be kidding. The responsibility, I'm not the creative writer. I am the feeler. I am there. What can I do for you? How can I serve you? Putting you in a podium and doing writings and such and other things. I was always behind the scenes and assisting. And so, but it came forth that it was time to be ordained, and we'll see how it all unfolds because there's many different ways to serve.
Yes,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
I've got to interrupt a little bit because we're meant to have a commercial break. I'm going to ask Robert, the engineer, the producer, let's skip that. Let's don't do that. And that way that'll give Reverend Joy and Reverend Jeff another minute or two if they've got a question. And then, of course, Reverend Joy wraps this up. But let's skip that commercial so we can keep talking for another minute or two.
All right.
What do y'all want?
That's what I wanted to know.
And I'm just curious if there's a prayer, a divine science prayer or affirmation that's very dear to you. Just as succinctly as you could reply, please. Yeah. Do you have a favorite divine science affirmation prayer or text book that you go to?
Well, for myself, God is working through and as me everywhere.
That's good.
So it is anything that's going on through me, through even today. It's like, here's my body, here I am. My spiritual awakening on this earth is to be present and to be there for God to work through me. And that takes a lot of effort. It's not a natural with life today.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And
Reverend Christine, do you?
I just wanted to share briefly. This goes back in the early days when I was a grocery checker. And I had this practice I did with each customer that came through my check stand before I said hello. I silently said, "The Christ in me greets the Christ in you."
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been delightful. The hour just whizzed by. We
need a part two.
Yes.
We're going to need a part two. I don't think we finished. We got to do another one.
I agree. We shall. So before we go, we want to invite you to join Divine Science Everywhere for a wonderful travel experience, a 5-day cruise aboard the MS Seashore, starting at $299. And we depart on November 2nd, 2005. And this all-inclusive getaway includes free Wi-Fi. And if you add a beverage package for $99, that could be from fancy coffee drinks to other drinks to, if you would like adult beverages, that's just for $99. And we'll explore Nassau and Paradise Island, Bahamas, and relax on MSC's exclusive island, Ocean Cay Marine Reserve. This is a special perks from the Happening Travel Club, including private happy hours and exclusive dining events. You can book for just $199. And this organization, that is the travel company, is a nonprofit. So that's why we get such a wonderful, wonderful rate. So I do hope that you join us on this amazing cruise for fun and this vital cruise for good as we come together with like-minded spirits. So thank you so much for joining us, and we would love to have you join us again. And thank you, New Thought Media Network. Divine means that God is in all, through all, and all, as all. Until next time, join us on Divine Science Everywhere on the New Thought Media Network. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
All right.